People think Anthropic is calling for responsible scaling of frontier AI to prevent human extinction. At least that's what the company says. But there's a more cynical, more strategic viewpoint. A global slowdown wouldn't just slow AI's march, it would also slow the market, locking in today's leaders. It would make it harder for open source competitors to reach Anthropic's capabilities. The timing isn't a coincidence. In May 2026, Anthropic just closed a record private fundraising round with a $1 trillion valuation and then filed for a public listing. Just 3 days later, it released a report warning that AI might be out of control and urged governments to consider slowing the entire industry. To some, it's caution. To others, it looks like strategy disguised as safety. Chapter 1. The Kill Switch. All it took was a week for the entire AI industry to be rocked. On May 28, 2026, Anthropic closed a new round of investment, its 8th since it emerged in 2021. The investors, Altimeter, Dragoneer, Green Oaks, and Sequoia, valued the company at roughly $1 trillion. It was a staggering amount. On paper, a company less than 5 years old now sits above JP Morgan Chase in valuation, a bank built over 2 centuries. Days later, the company told regulators it plans to go public, perhaps before the end of 2026. The listing would become one of the biggest in market history. Not a single share has ever been priced yet. Then came the bombshell. On June 4th, a report called When AI Builds Itself was released. It was co-authored by Marina Favaro, who leads the Anthropic Institute, and Jack Clark, the company's co-founder. Their warning was stark. AI systems are getting close to improving themselves with barely any human help. It's reaching the point of no return, and the world needs to hit the brakes before it's too late. Anthropic were the guiding light in the industry, willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. At least that's what it seemed like. Anthropic would only back an industry-wide slowdown under one condition: all major labs across countries agree to pause at the same time under verifiable rules. Until then, the race goes on. It's a glaring contradiction. The most valuable AI startup in the world is about to go public, and at that same time, it wants governments to coordinate a pause that would freeze every rival in place. Anthropic would become the locked-in leader of the AI industry. That isn't a prediction, the evidence is in its own code. Chapter 2. 80%. In May 2026, more than 80% of the code going into Anthropic's own systems was written by Claude, the company's own AI. Before Claude Code launched in February 2025, that figure sat in the low single digits. In just under 15 months, Claude went from writing almost none of the company's code to writing most of it. At the same time, Anthropic's engineers increased their production. They now ship 8 times as much code per day as in 2024. A week's worth of work can be done in a day. Jack Clark has stated publicly that the company believes it can reach 100% AI-written code by 2026. AI could soon be responsible for nearly all of its own code. Even Anthropic executives are issuing warnings about the tech. This changes what it means.
Why does Anthropic suddenly want to stop AI?
To be an engineer at the company. When the machine writes the code, the human is no longer the author. They just become the reviewer. It's not about how fast someone can type, but how quickly they can read. If a slowdown is implemented, competitors are left permanently trying to catch up. That's what Anthropic wants. But first, we want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Have you ever searched your own name online and found way more than you expected? Your home address, phone number, email, even information about your relatives can end up on people search sites and data broker databases. And once that information is out there, it can be used for phishing scams, identity theft, harassment, or worse. That's why I decided to try Incogni. Getting started was simple. I created my account, selected whose personal data I wanted removed, and gave Incogni permission to work on my behalf. From there, Incogni contacts data brokers for you, sends removal requests, deals with objections, and keeps you updated all along the way. What I really like is the dashboard because it makes the whole process feel real. You can actually see the requests going out and track the progress over time. And after more than a week, it's much easier to see just how much work Incogni is doing for you behind the scenes. This feels especially important right now because major data breaches keep exposing personal information, and that data can be used to make scam emails, calls, and texts seem much more convincing. I recently got one of those text messages saying a package couldn't be delivered and that I needed to click a link to fix it. And because I was actually expecting a package, it looked way more legitimate than it should have. Even one profile left up can create real risks. Incogni also has a new custom removals feature on the Unlimited and Family Unlimited plans. So if you find your information on a specific people search site or another website, you can flag it and one of Incogni's privacy agents will handle the rest for you. Go to incogni.com/TIS and use code TIS for an exclusive 60% off. Again, that's incogni.com/TIS, code TIS for 60% off. Click the link below and get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Chapter 3. The Loop. There have been a number of concerns surrounding the implementation of AI since it was first introduced, and one of the major worries has been the speed in which it's developing. The independent research group Meter measures if and when AI systems will become a threat to society. In one study, they asked a simple question: how long can an AI finish a task on its own before it slips up? They tested a number of frontier models going back to 2019 and discovered a pattern. Models could handle increasingly longer tasks, with capacity doubling roughly every 7 months. The trend held on for 6 years straight, and then it accelerated. Meter's newer estimate puts the doubling time since 2023 at roughly 4 months. AI Digest also looked at the data and suggested that if the pace holds, AI agents could handle a month-long task by 2027. And there is no ceiling. A couple of years ago, these systems could barely manage tasks of a few minutes. Now they can hold a thread of work that takes human engineers a day. If this rate holds up, the timescale shifts from days to weeks and then months. In April 2026, Anthropic said Claude made more than 800
Is AI becoming too dangerous to control?
fixes, reducing one class of system errors by a factor of 1,000. A human team might take years to clear something up like that. The model did it in a single month. Give the system enough computing power and machines could design and build their own replacements. Humans wouldn't be needed. While Anthropic is sounding the alarm, it's also careful to say that this hasn't happened, so it's not inevitable. But it, quote, could come sooner than most institutions are prepared for. If the model is building its successor, the industry needs a rule book, something that decides when to keep going and when to stop. And it just so happens, Anthropic already has one. Chapter 4. The Trigger. The responsible scaling policy reads like a warning, something that all of humanity should be aware of. The core idea is simple. An AI model can become powerful enough to be genuinely dangerous, and at that point, extra protections have to kick in. Anthropic calls those trigger points capability thresholds. The October 2024 version of the policy begins with the obvious risks: chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. Then it adds one more: an AI that can conduct its own AI research with little human help. The policy groups this under autonomous AI research and development. When a model nears that line, the guidelines don't suggest pulling the plug. Instead, it calls for more intensive testing and speeds up work on stronger safeguards. To put it simply, the company has built a structured way to handle the possibility of an AI that starts improving AI itself. This is more than an internal memo. A similar idea almost made it into law. California tried to do at a state level what this policy does inside one company. It focused only on the biggest models, the ones costing over $100 million to train, and it asked them to meet a higher bar. That meant more safety checks and external testing. Breaking the rules would mean heavy fines, starting at 10% of a training run, rising to 30% for repeat violations. But there was pushback, and critics saw an opening. The venture firm Andreessen Horowitz warned that the rules wouldn't stop at the industry heavyweights. Over time, they said, they would hurt startups and burden small developers. The reason is cost. The paperwork, the audits, the legal exposure all land hardest on the companies with the least money. A fine worth 10 to 30% of a training run is pocket change for a trillion-dollar company. For a startup, that equates to the entire company. The rules would mean a dedicated team of specialists to oversee the models. Only the firms with the deepest pockets could carry that cost. California's proposal never became law. Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed it in September 2024, but it never really went away. It keeps coming back in various guises in other states and countries. Meanwhile, Anthropic's responsible scaling policy remains in place. When one company starts to define the rules, those rules tend to become the baseline for everyone else to clear. Chapter 5. The Ladder. In May 2026, Anthropic's revenue hit $47 billion. At the end of 2025, it was only around $9 billion. The Wall Street Journal expects another 130% increase, which would push the company into profitability for the first
Why are tech billionaires panicking about the future?
time. Those numbers are reflected in the valuation. In September 2025, the company was worth $183 billion. By May 2026, it was almost $965 billion. It more than doubled in a single quarter. That puts the company in the same range as Tesla, which took 16 years to reach a $1.5 trillion valuation. Anthropic earned its first dollar less than 3 years ago, and since then its revenue has been growing more than tenfold each year. That's why the global AI slowdown would only benefit one company. The timing of the public listing and the public warning isn't a coincidence. Anthropic is pulling up the ladder at the right time. Chapter 6. The Moat. Anthropic's report describes how fast things are moving, and it also suggests that leading labs should coordinate how the development proceeds. In practice, that means the companies at the front end are helping define the constraints for everyone behind them. The most advanced systems become the new standard that everyone else has to meet. Except that standard isn't written from a neutral position, it is where the leading AI companies are at that point. This isn't a fringe argument, it's coming from senior figures in the industry. Yann LeCun, Meta's chief AI scientist and a Turing Award winner, has been one of the most vocal critics. He's worried that companies are overplaying AI risks in ways that push regulators toward restricting certain models. After Anthropic published a study claiming its system had been used in a cyber attack with minimal human involvement, a US senator cited it as evidence for tighter AI laws. LeCun hit back hard, saying critics were being played and warned that fear-based claims could end up shaping regulation in ways that lock out smaller players. David Sachs, an AI investor in Washington, has made a similar point, accusing Anthropic of using fear of risk as a way to shape regulation in its favor. If regulations do align with the bigger company's outlook, everyone else is trying to catch up to a standard they didn't help set. A frontier lab can support restrictions that it already is able to pass. Smaller labs and independent researchers can't. But it's not that simple. Anthropic itself acknowledges that a real global pause would require the US and China and other major AI powers to enforce it together. It's an ask that might never be met. But in the meantime, nothing has to stop. So you end up with calls for restraint on one side and continued acceleration on the other. Both exist at the same time without resolving each other. Chapter 7. The Resistance. Not everyone is buying the case for a pause, and the loudest objections come from one corner of the industry, open source. For years, Meta has released its most capable models for free so anyone could download and use them. Its Llama models have been downloaded hundreds of millions of times, and some companies now build their products directly on top of them. That's the version the AI open source camp is pushing for, models that aren't locked behind a paywall, but available for anyone to use and modify. A pause looks less like a protective measure and more like economic warfare. Yann LeCun wants the opposite. He says regulating AI research itself, rather than specific harmful uses, is extremely counterproductive. He says it's built on false ideas about the potential dangers of AI. His deeper concern is what happens to open source AI.
Is this the end of the AI gold rush?
Set a danger threshold or limit who can access the data makes it harder to release an open model. So the pushback is about more than the right to give software away, it's about stopping a wall from going up between the two groups, the handful of firms that can run at the new speed and then everyone else who can't. Once something like that is written into the global rules, it doesn't usually come back down. Chapter 8. The Shockwave. Up till now, this has been about Anthropic's code, but it's bigger than that. It eventually affects everyone and their paycheck. Anthropic's already admitted engineers don't write most of their code. They review it, and the moment that becomes industry standard, the human workforce collapses. The first jobs to feel it sit at the bottom of the ladder. Junior coding work has always been built on volume, and the cost of one more block of code has fallen to almost nothing. That closes the door to the industry. An entire generation of coders and engineers are locked out. The Stanford Digital Economy Lab tracked real employer data through 2025, and the evidence is alarming. For coders aged 22 to 25, jobs fell nearly 20% from the late 2022 peak. Workers over 30 in the same roles saw their numbers grow. The entry positions are being culled. It's happening across the industry. Salesforce froze junior hiring for a year. Google and Meta took on roughly half as many new graduates as in 2021. Total tech layoffs soared past 140,000 in the opening months of 2026 alone. That pace runs about 40% ahead of the same stretch in 2025. More and more companies are naming AI as the reason for this. A pause or a slowdown can't undo what has already happened. Even if every major AI company stopped training new frontier models tomorrow, the tools already exist. Claude Code would still be writing code. AI agents would still be running inside thousands of companies. That matters because the economic effects are already underway. The question is no longer whether AI will enter the workplace because it's already here. The question is how far the current generation of systems can go before the next one arrives. Today's models can't go back in the box. They're here to stay. Chapter 9. The New DNA. There's no denying that AI performance has exploded. AI systems are taking on longer and more complex tasks. At the same time, Anthropic is handing over its coding tasks to Claude, reducing the human element to a reviewer. Even if the largest labs agree to stop training bigger models, the systems they already have would keep working. They would keep writing code and help build the next generation of tools. That's what makes the whole debate so strange. The company calling for caution is also showing how fast the technology is improving. The same research that sounds the alarm is measuring the acceleration. Maybe a global agreement arrives, maybe it doesn't. Either way, AI is already building the next generation of AI. The future people are arguing about is not somewhere ahead of us, it's already here. The AI problem is getting bigger with each passing day, and it's not just the public that are getting worried. The corridors of Silicon Valley are starting to feel the pressure. Find out what's going on and why AI researchers are quitting and panicking on the way out. Or watch this.
What are they hiding about the next AI model?